So, who would like to read Genesis 1 through 5?
I can do it.
Okay.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Then he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. And evening passed and morning came, marking the first day.
All right. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's a big statement. And when we look at modern society, do we see a culture that embraces that idea or not really? Not really? What percentage of people do you think, if you went up to them and asked them, would say, yeah, God is the creator? Where do you think, like, if we were just to do a poll in America, all across, where do you think that value lies these days with where we're at?
I think most people say they don't know.
They don't know?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's fair. I'd rather hear I don't know than I'm convinced that there was a big bang that was random, right? I mean, that's better to hear that you're still searching for the answer. That's a good starting point. I'm very hopeful when I hear that. So Gallup did a poll, and they've been doing a poll, and they asked that question. And in 2022, the number of Americans that believe the Bible is the actual Word of God to be taken literally, like we do here, that it is God-inspired, God-breathed, that when I pick up this book, I am reading that everything in this book is true. Maybe not all truth is in this book. I mean, gravity's not mentioned in the sense that I know the specific feet per second on Earth, but nothing that is truth contradicts the Bible. Everything in the Bible is true. And when you go up to Americans and you ask them that, it's all the way down to 20%. 1 in 5 Americans. It used to be 24% when you go back 5 years. So in the last 5 years, it's fallen 4%. And it continues to go backwards. And when you ask people who believe that the Bible, then they ask them, do you believe the Bible is filled with fables, legends, history, moral precepts? That's risen to 29%. So the number of people that look at the Bible more as just an ancient fable story, no different than reading Homer's Odyssey or Plato, or looking at, the Epic of Gilgamesh, just any kind of ancient literature. They look at it and they go, yeah, that's what it is. It's just ancient literature. There's some morality in there. There's some stories in there, but it's really not any different than reading, Arabian Nights or, pick something that's just not truth. And the scary thing is that even among people who identify as evangelical, so in theory, when you look at Christians, it's a big tent, and you have Catholics, and you have Orthodox Christians, and then you have mainline Christians like Presbyterians and Methodists, more traditional. And then you have, in theory, the group that's the Bible is the Word of God, Bible churches. And those are typically known as evangelicals. And even among evangelicals, the number of people that identify as evangelical that will claim the Bible to be the inspired true Word of God is only 40%. So the number of people that you run into day in and day out, maybe not at Bellevue, but in society, maybe not in Memphis. The number's probably higher in Memphis. If you go to Chicago, the number's probably lower. When I go up to Chicago, it's amazing how different the culture is there compared to here. Or when you go to Florida, as you travel, it's interesting how culture deviates. But as a broad spectrum, you have a better chance of running into someone that does not believe the Bible to be the word of the Lord than somebody who does. And so as Christians who believe the word of the Lord, we need to equip ourselves with the knowledge of God and the word of the Lord to be able to have discussions with people, not to criticize them, not to make them feel shame, but to be able to persuade them and to be able to talk to them so that we can win them to Jesus. Just like Paul going to the synagogue and debating and talking with people and spreading the knowledge of Jesus. And he didn't do it by accusing, he didn't do it by being negative, he didn't do it by being mean, but he did it by talking the truth of the Lord. And so the main idea for today is that God planned your existence. He created you, and he has a purpose for your life. That's why you're here. You're here because the Lord has created you for some amazing, unique purpose that he's put you here to do, nobody else. And you have a very specific purpose for your existence. And as long as you have breath in your body, there's purpose for your life. If you had no purpose, you wouldn't be here. And so we're going to look at how that purpose plays out through creation, because it's planned, it's personal, and it's purposeful. Okay. So why do you think that people don't believe that the Bible is God's perfect word?
Maybe they look at, how fallen humanity is, and they look at sin, and they're like, well, the old-fashioned, how can a good God let these things happen? So they think that looking at our fallenness demonstrates his character, and because they see that brokenness, they're like, well, they equate that to his character, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, how could God allow this to happen? If there's really a God, how does he allow these terrible things to go on? I mean, right now in Haiti, it's complete lawlessness. It's terrifying. The desperation that's going on. I think back to, growing up, I remember the Rwandan genocide. It was awful. I'm half Jewish, and I've met Holocaust survivors. And you hear their stories, and the level of wickedness and depravity that man is capable of is shocking. And so, people might say, well, if there's a God, why do these things happen? It's a question that Job wrestles with as he pleads his case being innocent, and yet he's being punished and stricken. Why is it that I'm allowed to suffer? Why is it that I'm allowed to endure? Maybe not evil, but why is there suffering that's not deserved? It's a question that pops up, and the answer to that is sometimes we don't know. And that's hard. Why else do you think people might not believe God's word is perfect?
Evolution, Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory? That science has answered.
Something to explain it away.
Yeah, there's this idea that science and what we know, that we've come a long way, we've gained knowledge, we've got science now, and science has given us facts that disprove the Bible. There's this idea that how can it be true because we have science? But yet, nothing that science has proven has actually dispelled anything about the Bible. Even if there was a Big Bang, if there were, is that really not incompatible with the story of Genesis? In the beginning, there was nothing. God existed forevermore. Proverbs has a great creation account. It's one of my favorites because it actually talks about Jesus as God the Son playing with God the Father. It's just this really sweet story. But in it, wisdom, who is a type for the Son of God, it says, from everlasting I was established, from the beginning, from the earliest times of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding in water, then I was beside him as a master workman, and I was his daily delight, rejoicing always before him. There was nothing, and then there was something. So really, doesn't the Genesis account, isn't that the original Big Bang? I mean, if we think about it, isn't the Big Bang theory really just lifted from the Word of God? There was nothing, and then there was something. The more important question is, what made the something? If there is a Big Bang, okay. Well, how did it bang? How did all that stuff get there? Where did it come from? How did it form? How did we get all of the stuff that we see around us? Is there just pure chaos that aligned magically into this perfectly ordered universe? That doesn't even make sense. If there's anything that you learn when you study science, is that it's so ordered, it's so perfect, it's so rigid. When you do biology or chemistry, right, you have to follow the roadmap or it doesn't work. You do a lab experiment, and if you use too much of this chemical or you make it too hot or you don't mix it right, what happens? You fail, right? It doesn't work. It's not just like, let's throw some stuff in there and hope. Baking's that way, right? Isn't baking very chemistry oriented?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost a science. If you really want to do it right, people that I have a friend that's a hardcore baker, and I'll read a recipe and it says 2 cups of flour. So you get the cup thing out, and you go, and she's got the scale. And she goes, no, a cup of flour is X number of grams, and if you don't do that right, then, and then the moisture content can vary between the summer and the fall. And so she's like, well, you might need a little bit more water because it's dry in here. And you're just like, but every time I bite into one of her cakes or anything, it's like, this is amazing. And it's because she approaches it very and it's repeatable. Every one of them is always that. Whereas when I bake, which I don't do often, but when I do, it's usually good or okay, but it's not ordered and perfect because it's not, as I'm doing the chaos theory. There you go. It's about right. You taste the batter, that tastes about right, and it goes.
I would argue that people fail to look at the Bible as history. It's not just a made-up story. It has different authors, and these authors haven't even met each other, but they all write the same exact message, and it can even be traced down historically, down to Sodom and Gomorrah. It's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing, right? 40 authors, a couple thousand years, incredible harmony, very homogeneous.
I think it'd be even hard for someone to say, all right, within 100 years, we need these people to write this story, and it needs to be about the same. I think it's hard even it's definitely impossible for us humans to perform that feat, but it had to have been the power of God over 2,000 years for that to happen.
Absolutely. Forget even 100 years. Let's just, on Wednesday night, let's round up 40 people in our worship group. Let's just round up 40 people and be like, okay, I need all of you to write down the creation story. And let's see what happens. You're going to have light before water, you're going to have water before earth, or maybe you're going to have earth before water, or maybe the sky is going to come later. You're going to have all of these variations that occur, even if we all just read the story. It's like that old telephone game. Is that still a preschool game?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It was, relay the message, and by the third person, it starts with, Susan had a cookie, and by the third person, it's Susan's mom stole the cookie and ate it, and Susie didn't have a cookie, and now she's sad. And you're like, what happened? You're like, well, the second person was hungry because she had no cookie, and so the story changed. But that's not how the Bible works. It's incredibly consistent. So yeah, there's a lot of people that don't believe the Bible to be history. And one of the amazing things that we keep learning, every time there's a new archaeological discovery, it's amazing how the Bible keeps getting confirmed as history. Caiaphas, for years and years, there was a debate as to whether he actually existed, the high priest that wanted Jesus to be killed. And there was no evidence anywhere of his existence. You couldn't find a historical written record. Josephus had, there's just not a lot of, there weren't smartphones and videos. And so the further back you go, the harder it is, unless somebody's really important. You had to be really important to get a stone tablet. There's just not a lot going on. But then they find a burial box with Caiaphas' name on it in an excavation of Jerusalem. And you're like, oh, there's the guy. Timeline works, timestamp works. You're like, okay, there he is. Hezekiah made this waterway in Jerusalem. And you can actually go visit Hezekiah's water tunnel. But it was an unknown thing for centuries. They talked about it as like, no, that didn't exist, or the Babylonians destroyed it, and so it was before then, and it wasn't there was all these different theories about it not being a thing. And then one day they're digging and they're doing, I think they were working on fixing a pipe or something, and they were digging, and like a hole opened up in the ground, and they're like, whoa. And there it was. And all of a sudden, the Bible is confirmed. And over and over and over again, throughout history as we go further, what's happening is not that less of the Bible is being proven to be true, but more of the Bible is being proven to be true. And so we as Christians need to be able to stand on that. And the way that we do that is to know the word of the Lord. When we look at that Gallup poll, it reminds me a lot of in Judges. Joshua dies. You have Moses, you have Joshua, they conquer, they do their thing. And then he's gathered to his fathers, and they all die. And it says, all that generation dies, and another generation after them who do not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. The biggest danger as Christians that we have is when we don't know the word of the Lord, so we don't trust it and we don't rely on it. And then all of a sudden somebody comes up with a well-placed, kind of good-sounding fact that's really not a fact, and then we begin to question it. The same way that Satan, we're going to look at next week, begins with, did God really say? That's the question that begins the downfall of man. And it's the same question he's still asking today when he goes, did the Bible really say? Did you really hear that? Did you really read it? Well, if you don't know the word of the Lord, how can you stand on it and make a defense for it? And so we have to know the word of the Lord if we're going to be able to talk to people about the awesomeness of God. See, we were behind, so our break's going to be like 12 minutes later. Because we started late. So, creation is planned. It's orderly. It's not chaotic. And we're going to look at it and see that it's actually very finely tuned. So as we read through the creation story in verses 3 through the end of chapter 1, what do we read and what do we see about the creation? When you think about it's planned, what do you notice when you think about creation as it occurs in Genesis 1?
God keep calling you good.
It was very good. Absolutely.
The pattern of so the first 3 days it's light, water, land, and then the next 3 days he puts something in each domain.
Yeah, that's exactly. There's a structure to it, right? When we read the Genesis account, there's a specific structure. First comes light, then comes the heavens, the sky. Then all of a sudden there's land and there's plants and there's trees. And when we think about the ancient world and their understanding of creation, they kind of looked at it as a 3-sphere deal. We have the sky above us, we have the land and the water, And then something's got to be holding it up. And so they'll talk about the foundations of the earth, like there's pillars holding it up, because that's their understanding that they can grasp. It's not because it's inaccurate or scientifically wrong. It's God trying to convey the truth of his message to a people based on their current understanding. If I were to grab the time machine from Back to the Future and go back to ancient Israel and try to explain a light bulb, I'd walk into a dark room and be like, where's the light switch? I'd be like, light switch, And so you'd have to explain it as like, well, we have this thing that holds fire that is instant. We could flick a switch and it comes on and off, and it's kind of hot if you touch it, or they used to be. Not anymore. But, generally they used to be hot. And so it kind of would be like, hey, we have fire gives light and fire's got heat. But is it fire? Not really. I mean, it's electricity. But how do you explain that to somebody who has no relational framework from which to understand that? And so when you think about the pillars of the earth, the earth is being held up. There's a foundation. It might not be like a column, but it's there. And so it's a very accurate representation based on the knowledge that was available to them at the time to grasp it. And so you see this very orderly thing. And does that actually line up when we think about, we talked about the Big Bang, but the other popular attack on creation is evolution, right? This idea that somehow there was no life, and then all of a sudden, bam, something was alive. A process which we have not been able to replicate in a lab anywhere. At no point has anybody ever mixed any combination of chemicals. Has anybody ever stirred any goo together and been able to go, boom, there we go. That's how it started. Theory. It's a theory based on a need to deny a creator. If I'm going to deny God, then I need to come up with an alternative explanation. So if there can't be a God, that means it has to have been random. So if it has to have been random, then this is it. But even in their randomness, what does evolution really look like? I mean, if it starts with a single cell thing, and then it becomes plants, and then eventually little cells become fish, and fish become bigger fish, and then they crawl out,
and
they.
It's like, why is it not happening today?
Right. Yeah. I've not seen anything come from. But when we think about creation, we see land, we see plants, we see trees, we see fish, then we see birds, then we see animals on the ground. Does that not sound a lot like the idea of evolution, except without God involved? And instead of it being this is created, it's just one going to the other. But really, isn't it just a bad copy of the truth of creation? Isn't it just sort of like, hey, like Susie's cookie has been stolen and mom ate the cookie? I mean, it's kind of like that in the sense that it's not real. And so there's this amazing order. And when we look at science, what are some things that come to mind that you've heard that give you the idea that it has to be ordered when you look at creation? Does anybody have any things that they've read or they think about that gives them the idea that there's no way creation could be random because this is true?
Say down to just human physiology. Like
Okay.
when studying that and studying like the very details of our body and how it all works, like it's way too detailed.
They all work together, like each body system.
Yeah.
It's too complicated, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And we're still learning things about, that, I don't know, just the way, like, you're talking with creation and all that, like, the earth and the heavens and creation speak more that there is a God than there is not a God.
DNA, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the incredible complexity of what's involved in making a human. I mean, when you just start breaking it down. And how we haven't been able, I've been hearing since I was a kid that we're going to take a stem cell and we're going to be able to turn it into a kidney. Organ transplants are going to be a thing of the past. And, there's no telling how many hundreds of billions of dollars they've dumped into that deal for 30 years, 40 years, and We're no closer to making a kidney, at all. And it's just the complexity of it. Your eye has like 100 different components. And if one component was flipped with another, the whole thing stops. That's unreal. When you think about that level of sophistication. That level of sophistication, even with eons of time, just doesn't happen randomly. If I take a box of Legos and I throw them into my dryer on the air dry setting, and I turn it on, and I leave my house for 20 years, what are the chances that I come back and we've got anything even resembling anything? Like maybe two of them hooked up, maybe, possibly, but
a box-shaped puddle.
Right, yeah. What I'm going to have is, I turn the heat off. We're just using air dry. We're just letting them bounce around. Let's just say there's no heat. I took the heating element out. It broke, so we're just tumbling at this point. But there's just no way that happens. But that's the lie that science wants you to believe, is that, hey, look, you just throw all that together in a pot, you walk away for 1 billion years, and you have alligators. Mm-hmm. Wow. That's a big leap. It just doesn't even make sense. And Paul talks about that people want to deny it even then. Even then they wanted to deny it and believe their superiority. And Paul says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they are without excuse. All creation declares the glory of God. God is visible in everything. You don't need, Abraham found God without a Bible. He looked up at the heavens and he goes, there's got to be. He became a friend of God. Think about that. He became a friend of God without a Bible. All right, let's have some coffee. Let's break for 10 minutes, talk, and then we'll do the last 2 segments. Would somebody read Genesis 1, 26 and 27?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
Okay, and then who would like to read chapter 2, verse 7? Okay. Kathleen?
The Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being.
Okay, and then could you also read 18, 19, and 20? Yeah, sure.
The Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them, and whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds of the air, and the beasts of the field.
And then last, who wants to read 21 and 22?
I can.
Okay.
So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to come over the man, and he slept. God took one of his ribs and closed the flesh at that place. Then the Lord God made the rib he had taken from the man into a woman and brought her to the man.
Okay. So, next thing I want to look at is how personal creation is. That it's a deeply intimate, one-on-one thing that the Lord is doing. It's not just this nameless, faceless thing like you're trying to call American Airlines or Southwest for a refund after your flight's been bumped and you may never speak to a person ever. It's very different. And so in Genesis 2:7, what do we see about what he did with man? What did he do here? What's the active word? When we look at the sentence, what's the verb? The Lord asked, then the Lord God, what did he do? He formed man, right? So it's not accidental. It's not random. What we see here is that God, with his own hands, created man. He formed man. And then there's this moment where he breathed his ruha, his spirit, into us. It's the differentiator that we see between man and women versus all the other creatures of creation, is that from his nostrils he breathes into us, and we get that spark of the Creator. It's why we're able to create. When we talk about, what differentiates us, a lot of times science will try to, we're just the next step in the evolutionary chain. There was monkeys and there was us, and, that's it. And you're not special and you're not unique. But we've built civilizations and we've invented things and we've created things. And, there's tremendous creativity inside of us. When we look at art, we look at music, we look at all of these wonderful things. And it's amazing how humanity is able to fabricate something entirely new that never existed before. And that's because we have the spark of the Creator inside of us. We bear his image. That's why Satan hates us, because we are image bearers of God. That's why we're a little higher than the angels, because we are the image bearers of the Lord. And it's this deeply personal, intimate relationship. God makes us in his image. Anytime you're feeling down, you're feeling not worthy, you're not feeling special, it's important to remember that you bear the image of the Creator. That he cared about you enough, that he loved you enough, that he, not only did he form you, but that he gave you the spark of his creation. And so you have a unique purpose for him to fulfill. So he formed us. The potter and the clay is a popular biblical when we look at Joshua. And so, or not Jeremiah, sorry. What's the next thing that we see there in verse 18? What does the Lord say there?
It's not good
for him to be alone. So what does that tell us about God?
He's relational.
He's relational, yeah. And we're not supposed to be islands out it's not healthy to build a cabin in the middle of nowhere and live alone. It's just not the design. That's why COVID was so tough, right? Go sit in your house and be alone.
We're made for community.
Right. We're not built for that.
You get used to it after a while.
You do, but it's something that even when you get used to it, you don't ever feel fulfillment in it. I can be used. I live alone now. I used to not. I had a crowded house. I moved here for work. I was transferred. It was just me. I had a roommate. It was fine. Then he left. I was living alone. It was great. And then my mom got sick. I moved her down. And then there was an older guy that we found the Lord together, and he didn't have anywhere to go, so he moved in with me. And all of a sudden, there were two of us in there. And then another one of our friends was in town part of the time, didn't really have anywhere. He's like, hey, can I have a bedroom? And I'm like, sure. And before I knew it, I got 4 people. And we got me, you got these other 3 people. And then my mom gets sick and needs an aide. And she's running around before you. It was like it should have been a reality show. I wish it would have been filmed. I felt like I could have been rich and famous from it because it was absurd, the situations that would transpire. But in all of the stress that ever happened, it was always better to come home to community than to come home alone. Even now I have 2 dogs and they're in the house, and it's always nice when I open the door and they're excited to see me. And they're happy to see me, and there's just this, and it's nice to not be alone. It's why when you look at antidepressants and you look at anti-anxiety drug prescriptions, they went through the stratosphere during COVID. With the online, it's so much so that there became shortages of some of these drugs. And they were hard to get. Right now there's a shortage of Adderall. That was another one that went through the roof. People all of a sudden needed stimulants to be productive because they're alone. What time is it? What difference does it make? And so Adderall prescriptions went through the roof, and there's a shortage of it right now. It's hard to get. Why? Because people are alone. And when they're alone, problems pop up. The devil has never got more access to you than when you're by yourself. And so we see God's relationship with us as deeply personal, but that he doesn't want us to be alone, right? It's not good. And doesn't that show us that he cares about us? Because not only is it relational, but what does he do for Adam? After he's done naming the animals, after he's done kind of going over the earth, what does the Lord see at the end of all of that about Adam's situation? He doesn't have a partner. Doesn't have anybody to do life with. And so what does he do? Not a trick question. Creates someone. Yeah. He creates Eve.
I think, didn't he like say or present the animals in front of Adam, and then Adam still was not satisfied, to pick?
Yes, so he presents all the animals and he names them, and he sees that at the end of all of that he is still alone. And so he sees that there's not a suitable helper for him. We don't ever see Adam express frustration or resentment. We read in the story of the garden in the next chapter about how the Lord walked in the garden. And so there was definitely a deeply intimate, connected relationship between God and Adam during this process. You think about the animals coming to him and him naming them. God is manifestly present. Even more so than the burning bush. You have the presence of the Lord. So I doubt Adam felt alone, but the Lord knew he was alone. And even before Adam recognized the need, even before he saw the problem, the Lord was already there with the solution. And that's important for us to remember, because sometimes we'll encounter a problem and we'll be like, oh God, what do I do? Oh Lord, what's going to happen? But what we forget is that God is not restricted in time. And that before you even knew there was a problem, there was already a solution and a plan in place that the Lord had constructed. And when you have that problem and you lean on him, and in your weakness, the Lord can become strong and be glorified. That's what he wants. He wants you to lean on him and rely on him. He's always got the answer. We just have to get to the point of surrender so that we're ready for it. And so we see that he cared. He cared enough to create Eve, the creator of the universe. Cared enough that he was alone, that he said, no, that's not a good situation. So in your lives, or in people in general, doesn't have to be personal, how does God still show his personal interest in people today?
Answer prayers.
I think prayer is the biggest one. It's the way the Lord commands us to pray. I think one of the best things to do is to keep a prayer journal and to write down the things you've prayed for. And then and my aunt was the one that taught me this. She keeps a prayer journal, and it goes back decades at this point. And she writes the date that she starts praying for something, and she'll write the date that it's answered. And I remember when I found the Lord, and I called her up to tell her, and she started breaking down on the phone crying, and she goes, you don't know how long I've been praying for this phone call. And there was a date there. And there was every day she had been praying and praying and praying and praying. And you cannot outrun prayer. Yeah. The Lord hears. That's why he says in Proverbs, do not oppress the widow and the orphan, for their Redeemer is strong, and I will fight for them. Never forget that your Redeemer is strong and he will fight for you. And when the devil makes you question it, if you have that journal to go, all of a sudden you can start looking back and going, God was here and here and here and here. And it makes it impossible for you to question how much he cares.
There's so many times in the Bible where someone's praying and before they can even finish praying, God's already, like you said, before we even know the problem, he has the solution. But sometimes I think he just waits for us to look to him and say, are you going to trust me? But and Brother Stu says it all the time. There's certain things that happen with prayer versus without. And so I think we forget that, prayer is an act of faith, because you're not going to talk to something that you don't know. It'd be kind of weird if I was just talking in an empty room, but when you talk to God, that's a step of faith, because that shows that you know he's there.
Absolutely. And that is why he will not do certain things without prayer. It's not that he can't or that he won't, but that until you get to the point that you cry out for him so that he can deliver you and reveal his glory to you, you're not ready for that answer. It's not a mistake that he led the people of Israel all the way to the Red Sea and there was no escape route. And they're all looking at Moses going, you led us out here to die. What are you doing? But no, the Lord led them to a point where they had no choice but to cry out. And as that army showed up, he already had the plan. It wasn't like, what am I going to do? Oh, I guess I got to split the sea. No, he knew what he was going to do. But he wasn't going to reveal his glory until they cried out for his help. So last, I want us to look at the idea that creation is purposeful. We've looked at it and we've seen that it is ordered, that it is, planned, that it is personal, but it's also purposeful. There's a reason for creation. It's not just like God was bored. It wasn't like him and Jesus and the Holy, it wasn't like he was just sitting around in eternity past going, there's nothing to do. Let's just make something. And it was just random, and then we sinned, and he's like, oh no, what are we going to do now? We need to think of something, and it's just chaos created a need, and so he fixed a need, and it's not like he's some plumber patching a broken pipe that keeps breaking along the way, and so he patches it again. There's tremendous purpose and design from the beginning. It's interesting that in Peter, it talks about before the foundations of the earth were laid, he knew your name. So we looked at Romans and it said that all creation declares the glory of God. That's from Romans 19, when he talks about people being without excuse. And so what is the purpose of creation? What's your purpose? Why are we here?
To know God and make him known.
Yeah. Yeah, the Westminster Catechism, which is kind of like what all the other catechisms are based on, it boils it down to the most basic sentence. And it says that we were created to glorify God and enjoy him forever. That's your purpose. To bring glory to God, and then to, as you know God, to enjoy his presence forever, eventually in heaven, worshiping him forever and ever, like we see in Revelation. So the purpose of creation is to glorify God. All the heavens declare the glory of God, right? Even the birds, when you wake up in the morning and you hear them singing, what are they doing? Bless you. Praising the Lord, declaring the glory of God. When you look at a sunset and it looks beautiful and it's amazing and it's prettier than any picture you could ever take or any painting you could ever make, what is that declaring? God's glory. So how do we, as people, how do we glorify God in our everyday lives? What are the practical elements of that? When we talk about you were created for a purpose, what does that mean? What is the basic nuts and bolts of that? Share the good news, right? And to work, right? What do we see Adam do before the fall? A lot of times people will think work is a curse. Like you're going to, he talks about this ground's dried up. There's thorns, there's thistles. You're going to sow in agony and there's going to be the struggles. But what do we see before the fall of man, Adam doing in the garden? Taking care of it. Work has always been part of God's design. Even before sin, I firmly believe that we're going to get to heaven one day and we're going to have jobs. There's going to be work involved. It's not going to be like an endless sun in the fun retirement with, here's your RV and go park it in front of Disney World and watch fireworks. Because, that's great for a week, but then what? If you ever meet retired people that don't do anything, they're really not that happy. Yeah. Everybody needs purpose. Yeah. Everybody needs something to do. There's no, I saw Avatar a couple days ago. It was long.
It was really good.
It was really good. It was beautiful.
It was, yeah.
But one of the lines that, there was a lot of it, story-wise, whatever. It's just not. But one of the things I liked in it was that as they come to this new sea world, the leader there instructs his people and says, we're going to show them how to swim. We're going to show them what they do so that they do not suffer the indignity of being useless. And that might have been the most biblical thing in that movie. Because there was a lot of other stuff that was like people are bad. But the Lord wants you to have the dignity of purpose. He wants you to have a job because it brings dignity and it brings purpose and it brings connection. And it brings focus to your life. So we have to work. And then, what else do we see Adam do as he works before the fall? He obeys, right? Do we ever see Adam question in the naming, like, well, I don't want to name animals today? Like, do we see like, no, I don't feel like it, God, like, that's not a thing. Like,
I wonder how long that process took.
It's a good question. It's a good question. We have no idea how old Adam was in the sense of before the fall. We know how long he lived, but we don't know exactly timeline-wise. Like, did that take 100 years? Did it take 50 years? Did it take a year? It's a great question. And great heaven question. One day to ask. Be like, hey, Adam, tell me. You're going to get to meet him one day.
That's crazy.
Think about that. You're going to get to meet Adam one day. He's not like just some sort of like caricature that one day you're going to run into Adam. You're going to be able to go talk to Peter and be like, hey, what was it like walking on water? Tell me. Did your feet get wet? Was there water between your toes or not? Like, how did that work? Did it feel wet on the bottom of your feet or did it feel dry? Was it like a levitation? Talk to me.
How Adam enjoyed walking with dinosaurs?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we see that Adam was obedient. And we need to be obedient, right? When we live in rebellion, isn't that a problem? And then last, marriage. We see Adam and Eve given in marriage. And it models biblical marriage, the only kind of marriage, a man and a woman. And it's also a picture of Christ's relationship to the church. We are the bride of Christ. And one day there's going to be the marriage supper of the Lamb in heaven. And I'm out of time for that. So, do your best 2-minute journal.